I placed the envelope by Griffin's plate before I sat down. He didn't open it, just tucked it under his napkin, like it was a receipt someone else would deal with. That morning, I'd wired them another $1 $200. Rent, daycare, whatever was short again this month. Nina hadn't said a word when she texted the request, just sent the usual emoji, and that Chase account number I knew by heart. Griffin stood and raised his glass before we even took a bite. To Karina, he said, smiling across the table, "The most generous woman we know." The room went still for a second, at least for me. I looked at him, at my son. He wasn't joking. He didn't even glance in my direction. Nina was beaming. Karina looked modest and polished in that way she always did, as if grace was built into her cheekbones. She lifted her glass slowly like royalty, acknowledging a crowd. I noticed her bracelet, the silver one, with the tiny opal in the center. I had bought that for Nina 3 years ago, for Mother's Day. She'd unwrapped it on my couch and called it perfect. Now it sat on Karina's wrist like it had always belonged there. I smiled. Not wide, just enough. I buttered a piece of roll that I didn't want and asked how the baby was doing. Nina answered, but my mind drifted. He really said that. Out loud. In front of everyone. To Karina. Like the thousands I'd sent over the past 2 years had been nothing. Like groceries didn't appear. Like utilities paid themselves. Like that check under his napkin hadn't been drawn from the last savings bond I'd ever planned to touch. I excused myself early, said I wasn't feeling well. I didn't lie. And the moment I got home, I opened my laptop not to transfer more, but to search for something I hadn't in years, the full transaction history. Every wire, every Zelle. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to see where the truth had gone. 2 years earlier, Nina sat at my kitchen table, tears gathering along her lashes, but never falling. Her hands clutched a coffee mug like it was an anchor, and her voice was just above a whisper. "Griffin would be embarrassed if he knew I came to you," she said. "But we're behind on rent. The baby was sick last month, and we're just not catching up." I didn't hesitate. I reached for a pen, ready to write a check, but she stopped me. "We can't cash paper checks easily. Could you transfer it directly? I can give you our Chase info." I nodded, and she pulled out a small slip of paper from her purse, already written, already folded. I remember that part vividly. It wasn't something she scribbled down in desperation. It was ready, waiting. She said, "It's our joint account," and I believed her. Why wouldn't I? They were married. They had a child. I'd watched them say vows. I'd helped assemble the crib. I'd bought the stroller Nina had chosen. It never occurred to me that the name on the account might matter. That first transfer was $800. I sent it within an hour of her leaving my house. She texted me a string of hearts and said, "You saved us." I didn't tell Griffin. I figured it was between us women. And it became routine. Every time a bill was tight, every time a surprise expense came up, Nina would reach out. Always soft, always grateful. And always through text, never in front of him. The amounts varied, but the rhythm stayed the same. When Griffin thanked Karina at their daughter's first birthday for always being there financially, I said nothing. When Nina handed Karina the gift I'd mailed weeks earlier, wrapped in her handwriting, I bit my tongue. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit. What mattered was they were okay. But now, staring at the numbers on my screen, seeing Nina's name beside every transaction, no joint anything, I felt something colder than betrayal. I felt played, and I started printing the receipts. I had always been careful with money. Numbers made sense to me. Emotions, those were trickier. But helping, I understood. So when the first few transfers went smoothly, I built it into my routine. Between $800 and $1 $200 a month, depending on what Nina said they needed. The car needs tires. Daycare just raised their rates. Each time she texted thank yous with too many exclamation points and sometimes a picture of the baby wrapped in a towel or clutching a toy. I convinced myself that was enough. I stopped buying myself new shoes. Put off replacing the dishwasher. I didn't mind. They were building a life and I was just one quiet beam holding up the frame. But then the beam started to splinter. It began with small things, Griffin thanking Karina for the new car seat I had ordered from their baby registry. Nina saying, "Mom got it for us." I thought she meant me. She didn't. Later, it was the bracelet I gave Nina when she said she'd cherish, now shining on Karina's wrist. A guest at a birthday party complimented it, and Karina smiled. A little gift from my daughter. No correction. No glance toward me. Still, I swallowed it. Told myself it doesn't matter who they thank as long as they're okay. But over time, it wasn't just gifts. It was respect. Griffin started calling Karina Mom. Spoke of her as if she were the cornerstone of their survival. If it weren't for her, we'd be in real trouble. He never said that about me. And maybe I could have lived with being invisible. But when I started reading through the transactions, stacking printouts into tidy piles, each line marked by my sacrifice, I realized I hadn't just been invisible, I'd been erased. And the worst part wasn't that they didn't know what I'd done. It was that they had handed the crown to someone who hadn't lifted a finger. It was Dottie who said it. We were sitting on her porch after her physical therapy appointment, drinking lukewarm coffee and watching squirrels raid her bird feeder. She asked casual as anything, "You're sure that account Nina gave you was joint right? Both their names?" I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. I wasn't sure. I thought I was. That night, I pulled out the folded slip of paper Nina had given me 2 years ago. I still had it tucked inside an old cookbook, yellowed and soft at the creases. I stared at the numbers. No names written, just a 9-digit routing code and account number, and a neat little chase scrawled in the corner. I opened my laptop and signed into my bank's transfer history. Clicked through every Zelle, every wire, every time I'd sent money, with a subject line like baby formula or just in case. 19 months. Over $17,000. And then I did something I'd never thought to do. I searched the account details through the Chase online verification tool. It took less than 3 minutes. Account holder Nina R. Boone. Just her. Not a joint account. Not Griffin and Nina. Just Nina. All that time and I'd never checked. The next morning, I sent Dottie a text. "You were right. It's just her name." She called me 5 minutes later. No small talk. "You okay?" I wasn't. Not really. But I told her I was. Told her I had a folder now and a printer humming for the first time in years. And later that evening, as I sat on the living room floor with pages spread around me like leaves, I thought about the lie I let grow. Nina never said Griffin didn't know, but she never said he did. She said our account. She said we're behind. She said he'd be embarrassed. Not once did she say he asked. And that's when the shame started to shift from humiliation to something else, something sharper. Because maybe she held the blade, but I handed her the handle. I opened a spreadsheet. Old habit. When life feels too heavy, I turn to columns, to order. To the truth numbers don't know how to hide. I entered every transfer date, amount description. I labeled each one rent, daycare, groceries. The polite lies I'd believed stacked one after another. Then I started checking what happened after those payments. I had access to receipts Nina had forwarded over the years, confirmation emails, Venmo screenshots, even a few thank you texts where she accidentally left a balance showing. The patterns fell into place faster than I wanted them to. I sent $1,000 on the second Friday in April. That same weekend, Nina checked into a resort in Ashland for a wellness retreat. $600 gone in 2 nights massage, wine, poolside brunch. The baby stayed home with Karina. The next month, Nina called to apologize. "We're behind on diapers and formula again," she said. I hate asking Mom. I told her not to worry. That same week, I transferred $850. 3 days later, Nina sent $500 to a woman listed in her Venmo history as Mom. The caption read, "Just because, love you." I stared at that line until the screen blurred. I'd thought I was helping them build something solid, something lasting, but my generosity hadn't gone toward bottles or baby shoes. It had been funneled into spa water and designer bags and gifts wrapped in someone else's name. I found an email confirmation for a handbag, $320 sent to Karina's address. The gift tag, "From your favorite girl." That bag had been complimented at dinner 3 weeks ago. I remember. Karina had said, "Nina spoils me." She did. With my money. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the numbers like a puzzle that had finally clicked into place. This wasn't 1 or 2 slips. This was a pattern, a system, a scam wearing family's face. And suddenly, the question wasn't how I'd missed it. It was how long I'd let myself believe I was giving when really I was being stolen from. Griffin clinked his fork against his glass like he always did when he was about to say something sentimental. We were sitting in their backyard this time, string lights matching paper plates, and Karina seated at the center of it all, like it was her court. "I just want to say," Griffin began, "we wouldn't have made it through this past year without Mom." He looked straight at Karina. "She's been our biggest supporter emotionally, financially, in every way." Karina tilted her head with practiced modesty, placing her hand lightly over Nina's. Nina smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like nothing had just been erased in front of me. No one looked at me. No one thanked me. I didn't even blink. That night, I went home, turned on the printer, and let it run until the tray overflowed. Bank transfers, screenshots, Venmo logs, shipping confirmations. The folder grew thick with proof, each page a receipt for my invisibility. Then I logged into my banking app and did what I should have done a year ago. I removed Nina's account from the recurring payments list. I deleted every saved note labeled help or urgent or just this once. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat there in the quiet, feeling like a bone that had finally set after being fractured too long. I reached for a notepad and tore off one square, wrote 6 words in ink, pressed the pen hard into the paper, "Let her pay next month's rent." I folded it once and tucked it into the same drawer where I kept Griffin's birth certificate and his old drawings from kindergarten, the drawer where I put things I once believed would never betray me. Then I turned off the lights. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. My hands were steady, my mind clear. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't check my phone to see if they needed anything. The call came just after noon. I let it ring once before I picked up. Nina's voice was tight, higher than usual. "We're short on rent," she said. "Did something happen with the transfer? I didn't ask which one." I already knew she meant the money I'd always sent between the 1st and 3rd of the month, like clockwork. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the birds outside my window. "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped sponsoring strangers." There was silence, then a brittle laugh. "I don't understand what you mean." "I think you do." She stammered something about needing to talk later, that it wasn't a good time. I told her not to bother. An hour later, a text from Griffin buzzed through. "What transfer?" I stared at it a long moment before typing, "Ask your wife." He didn't reply. Not right away. The stillness after that felt necessary, like something that had finally broken the surface of a lie too long submerged. I imagined him turning to Nina in the living room, asking calmly at first, then with sharp edges. I imagined her floundering because there were no good answers, only timelines and excuses she could no longer reshape. I didn't feel satisfaction, just the absence of pretending. That night, I made soup and watched an old movie. I muted my phone, let the missed calls pile up. I went to bed with my bank account untouched for the first time in months. By morning, Griffin had sent 4 messages and left 1 voicemail. His voice uncertain, almost gentle. He wanted to talk. He wanted to understand, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I opened the envelope where I kept every printed transfer receipt. I laid them out across my kitchen table one by one, not to study them anymore, but to prepare, because I knew what was coming next. And this time, I wasn't going to let someone else tell the story for me. He showed up the next evening without warning. No knock, no call ahead, just Griffin standing on my porch like a man who no longer knew what door belonged to him. I opened it. He looked smaller than I remembered. "I need to talk," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at the table where I'd once taught him how to count coins. He didn't touch the coffee I poured, just sat with his hands pressed together, elbows on his knees. She told me everything he said. I didn't respond. I waited. He ran a hand through his hair, then reached into his jacket. Pulled out papers. Printouts of bank logs, mine and Nina's. Highlighted lines. Notes in the margins. I didn't ask how he got them. He must have looked through her phone, her emails, maybe her face when she realized she was finally out of excuses. 20,000, he said quietly. "Of your money?" I nodded once. She said it was for us. Rent. Groceries. Daycare. He swallowed. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. She gave half to her mom. His voice cracked. Half to herself. He didn't cry, but his face twisted like someone who had. Maybe hours before. He stared at the table, then at me. I looked at him. That boy I raised, the one who brought me weeds as bouquets, who scraped his knees trying to fix everything himself. He was still in there somewhere. But now he was sitting across from me, hollowed out by a truth he should have uncovered long ago. "I didn't know," he whispered. I still said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, but because he needed to sit in the silence. Because sometimes silence is the only mirror sharp enough to reflect everything that went wrong. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. "I need to make this right," he said. I stood, I nodded, and I let him try. I invited them both formally through a message sent at noon. "Nina, Griffin, I'd like to see you both tonight. My place, 6 p.m. No excuses." The response came 10 minutes later from Griffin. "We'll be there." They arrived on time. Nina looked uneasy, her posture too stiff, her smile too thin. Griffin stood behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the living room, like it had changed since the last time he was there. It hadn't, but I had. I didn't offer drinks or small talk. I pointed to the table already cleared, except for the thick folder in the center, the same one I'd been building for weeks. I sat. They followed. I opened the folder, flipped it to the first tab: transfers. Printed receipts, bank logs, pages upon pages, all with my name and Nina's account number. Then to the second: spending. Spa weekends, hotel stays, boutique orders. The third: Venmo to Karina. Every line tagged with hearts and thanks. All using my money. Finally, I pushed it toward Griffin. He didn't reach for it. Not yet. He looked at Nina, then back at me. "I thought you should see," I said, "what you've both been standing on." Nina's face had gone pale. She started to speak, but I raised my hand gently. No anger, just finality. "I have nothing else to explain," I said. "No more to give." I stood, smoothed my blouse, and looked directly at Griffin. "If she's everything I'm not," I said softly, "then let her pay the next bill." 3 months passed without a single request. No texts about rent, no calls about car repairs, no gentle nudges wrapped in guilt. My phone stayed quiet, and I learned to enjoy the silence. I spent my mornings volunteering at the food bank downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I sorted cans, stocked shelves, and answered questions with patience I hadn't used in years. No one there expected me to give more than I could. No one there asked me to disappear. Then on a quiet Saturday, just before closing, I turned around and saw Griffin standing in the doorway. He looked different. Older, maybe. Or just stripped down to who he really was without the lies standing between us. He stepped forward, pulled something from under his arm, and placed it on the table beside the canned beans and boxed rice. It was my own folder, my transfer logs, but now covered in highlights and handwritten notes. He'd studied them, understood them. His voice caught in his throat. I'm sorry. I never asked. I never thanked you. I didn't rush to fill the space. He needed to say it without my prompting, without rescue. Then he reached into his jacket and handed me a cashier's check. Full amount. Every cent I'd ever sent down to the last dollar. No words, no expectation. Just quiet restitution. I looked at it, then at him. Not guilt, he said quickly. I know that doesn't fix anything. But you should have it, and I should know what it cost. I nodded once, then walked to the back counter, poured him a cup of coffee from the dusty pot we kept for volunteers, and set it in front of him. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Later that night, after I'd washed the mugs and locked the doors, I went home and pulled down the old note on my fridge. In its place, I taped a fresh one. A mother can forgive, but she never forgets who she is.